So thanks for joining. My name's Randolph. I'm Head of Innovation at ENA, and today we're going to be telling you all about our Network Innovation Competition Call for Ideas. So if we could just go on to the first slide, please. So just housekeeping before we get into it. As you can probably see from the participants list, we've got quite a lot of people joining the call today. So if you could stay on mute the whole time, that would be greatly appreciated. There will be a question and answer session later. However, we're going to use the chat box for that. So hopefully you'll be able to go to the show conversation box in Teams. Feel free to type your questions in there. You can type them as we go along through the initial presentations, and then we will get to them at the end. Any that we don't have time for today, we will follow up with after the webinar. However, we do have at least an hour for Q&A, so hopefully we'll be able to get through everyone's questions. We might ask some people to speak and bring you off mute if we need clarification on a question. Number of people, we will try and stick to the chat box as much as possible, please. So in terms of agenda, I'm going to give a brief introduction. Then we're going to hear from Emily at Ofgem. We are then going to hear from Frank Clifton on the requirements for the call. You'll then hear from Geraldine and some of our members on reflections from previous years. And then we're going to open it up to you guys. I noticed that someone has already asked about recording, and no doubt someone will probably ask about slides as well. So we will be recording it, and also we will circulate the slides afterwards. So that we'll follow up in an email with that. So without further ado, if we can move on, please. So quick reminder, ENA, we represent the gas and electricity networks in the UK and Ireland at transmission and distribution. However, the Network Innovation Competition that we're going to be talking about today is focused just on our electricity distribution members. And that is because of how the innovation funding is working with the current regulatory regime. The others have participated previously, but they're going into a new regime next year with a new mechanism for larger projects. So you'll hear more about that outside of this call. If we move on, please. So just as a reminder, the current innovation funding mechanisms for RIIO-1, which go up to 2023 for electricity distribution and for all of our other members, is ending at the end of March next year. There's two types of funding available: Network Innovation Allowance, which is for smaller innovation projects, and these can be run at any period during the year, and you can pitch them to ENA using our collaboration portal at any time. However, today, as you can see circled, we're focusing on the Network Innovation Competition, which is an annual competition that we hold and Ofgem signs off on for larger projects. And we'll talk about what that actually means a bit later. So if we move on to the next slide, please. So just as a reminder for some of the information sources, all of our previous projects, including the Network Innovation Competition projects, can be found on our Smarter Networks portal. So highly recommend that you jump on that, have a look at what previous projects we have run and what they actually look like. We also have our NI collaboration portal. This is where you can pitch your innovation projects to the networks. For the NIA projects, you can pitch these at any period during the year. And obviously we are running the call for ideas now, and many of you probably heard about that through that portal. And just finally, I can announce now publicly that our Energy Networks Innovation Conference, which is replacing our old Low Carbon Networks Innovation Conference, or LCNI conference, this is going to be held virtually, of course, on the 8th and 9th of December, and it's going to be encompassing all of our members. So it will be T&D, gas and elec. And that's going to be the enduring model going forward. Obviously, hopefully it will be in person as well next year, but this year will be digital. Tickets haven't quite opened for that, but they will be opening shortly. If we could move on, please. I'm now going to hand over to Emily Cito from Ofgem, who's going to give us a bit of an introduction to the innovation funding from an Ofgem perspective. So over to you, Emily.
Thanks very much, Randolph. Hello, everyone. My name is Emily Cito, and as Randolph said, I'm from Ofgem. I work specifically in the strategy and decarbonization team. You can imagine that this area has mushroomed over the last year and a half or so, and we've got some particular eyes on in terms of our attention to innovation and what we would hope innovation would. How we hope innovation would help with decarbonization. I'd like to thank Randolph and the ENA for organizing this webinar as well as for this slot. And my goal today is to give you a brief orientation to Ofgem's approach to innovation. Next slide, please. So the first item I'd like to cover is actually to reinforce our commitment to innovation. This is a summary of our recent strategy documents going back to July 2019. In our strategic narrative, we stated that decarbonization of GB's energy system at lowest cost to consumers is one of our primary goals. This sits alongside equally with our mission, which is to protect the interests of consumers, all of which we view as being enabled through competition and innovation. In October 2019, we issued our consumer vulnerability strategy, which includes a section that articulates some extremely good principles around considering how innovation affects vulnerable populations, as well as some pitfalls that we've seen. So I encourage all innovators to read this and to consider it. In particular, Chapter 7, it's about 4 pages. So please do have a look at that. And more recently, in February of this year, we published our decarbonization action plan, which offered some more tangible actions against innovation, including establishing a strategic innovation fund and expanding our regulatory sandbox. Next slide, please. Thanks. So this is a landscape, if you will. These are all the types of innovation delivery vehicles that Ofgem has. I'm not going to cover everything, and indeed, 2 of these columns, the ones with some highlights in red, are under proposal and allude to areas that Randolph earlier said are not necessarily for discussion today. But what I'd like to do is talk first about the orange column, the innovation link. This is a service that is open to all innovators. There are a couple particular products, if you will, under this service, including fast, frank feedback, where if you've got a question, you email it in, and we try to get to it in a fast, frank way. We have a regulatory sandbox where we can help explore easement of rules for innovation purposes and for experimentation, if you will. And we offer also comfort letters. We understand that early stage innovation can be highly risky, and innovators may need confirmation that a certain activity is permissible, as well as we offer insights based on our experience. I'd like to say that there are no funding opportunities associated with the link, but to engage with us also has no cost. We hope that this benefits the entire energy landscape and innovators from all sectors. This is demand-led. That means it is mostly reactionary to however innovators choose to approach us. There has been a refresh of the sandbox summer of this year, and I've included links there both to the sandbox generally as well as to that updated to the link generally as well as to the updated sandbox guidance. Now within the price control, I'll just say again in those first and third columns that these are proposals for the next regulatory period as applies to electricity transmission and gas, and those links actually in particular are for the electric distribution sector specific methodology consultation, which is currently closed, but if you'd like to understand a bit more, you can look at those later. And of course, you're here today to hear from the team about the network innovation competition in the ED1 period, and that itself is the middle column. I'm not going to touch on details because you'll get that today throughout the session. And lastly, in the purple, Ofgem, through environmental programs, and in particular, the energy company obligation, we administer an innovation application, innovation component of ECO. Okay, great. Next slide, please. So I am currently developing, off the back of all this, an innovation narrative to inform markets and innovators clearly where Ofgem sees the need for innovation and its role for innovation in the journey to net zero. This will build on the previous documents that I've mentioned. It's something that I'm working with internally, and I'm also going to speak with our network companies about to get their views. I would hope that some innovators would also like to be might also like to be included in that conversation. So I've included my contact details if you have any questions about anything I've said, or potentially would like to speak with me. Next slide. And this is a statement of Ofgem's core purpose and values, and I very much so look forward to seeing the fantastic ideas that you bring to the table as innovators, and the projects that will come through in the current upcoming round of the NIC. Thanks very much. Next slide. I think it's yep.
Fantastic. Many thanks, Emily. That was appreciated and really good to have Ofgem support. For everyone else, Emily is going to be staying on for the rest of the call. So if you have any questions specifically for Ofgem, again, feel free to ask them in the chat and we can pick them up in the Q&A a bit later. So the call for ideas for next year, which we are starting this year, and that's why it's 2020, 2021. So it's open to all third parties. So all of you guys, SMEs, startups, innovators, manufacturers, whoever it is, we want to hear from everyone. As I said, we're focusing specifically on DNOs this year because of how the RIO funding pots fall. We want to develop high quality innovation projects. This is not just a sales pitch. We really want to deliver really interesting, innovative projects that deliver for our customers. There's up to 70 million available. Ultimately, the decision is made by Ofgem, but that is the maximum amount available. We have a specific focus on certain areas this year, including those from our innovation strategy, which I'll talk about in a minute. But I guess one of the key points we want to note is this year we really are taking in some additional steps to support you guys, to support applicants, and really drive home really good quality, interesting projects. So you'll see a bit later, we're offering a range of support. Obviously, we've got this webinar. All of the DNOs are open for you to come and chat with them throughout the tendering period, whether that's either with me in a group, with one-on-one discussions with them. But also this year, for the projects that we decide to take forward to interview, we're going to be hosting a range of one-on-one sessions between the networks and the potential projects to help them develop and craft their pitch for those interviews, so that we can really give you guys a lot more guidance on what a good pitch looks like, and really, I guess, increase the quality and substance of some of those projects. So we'll be offering that service. In terms of when we offer that, you'll see a bit later in the timeline. So if we just move on to the next one, thank you very much. So this is some of the high level criteria that we're looking for. Frank from SSE is going to go into a bit more detail in a minute. But basically, the key thing and the number one thing you should think about is that the projects must meet the eligibility criteria set out in the NIC governance document, which is available on Ofgem's website. We have the link specifically to it at the end of the slide deck and useful links. It's absolutely essential that you read this and understand what is eligible and what is not. We have a range of priority focus areas, as I said, and I'm going to talk a bit more about that on the next slide. We are also looking for people who are open to collaboration with others. What we found last year is while some individual projects could be taken forward, there was quite a lot of overlap between different people with different ideas. So there's potentially the option this year to bring different parties together to collaborate on a project, specifically where there's overlap between different ideas that come forward. And Ofgem's quite keen to see that collaboration and joint way of working again. We're also looking for innovators who are willing to fund the bid costs. You can't recover the costs for bidding, so you need to commit to doing that, and also contribute some funding towards the project. We think it's only fair when we're spending customers' money that people have a bit of skin in the game as well. And also in terms of the size of projects, which often comes up, we're looking for longer duration projects. So not, 3, 4, 5, 6 month sprints. We're looking for longer projects, 2 to 3 years. And in terms of budget, we're looking for over 2 million. Anything below that is probably likely to be an NIA project. So using the other funding pot, we're looking for the bigger projects. If we just move on, please. So what are we focusing on this year? So we launched a electricity network innovation strategy alongside a gas one earlier this year in March, which has a range of key themes and principles which you can see on the right hand side there. So we are interested in projects that fit any of these themes, but specifically we're interested in those that address meeting net zero and helping us progress along the pathway to net zero, but also those that address customer vulnerability. Those are the key focus areas for us this year. While we are definitely going to be accepting all options and all ideas from the other themes, those are our specific aims this year. And that ties in very well with what Emily was saying and what is going to be the focus for innovation within RIIO2 going forward as well. So it lines up nicely with that. You can access our strategy document on our website. The link's here, also in the back of the slide deck. Again, highly recommend that you read this as well as the governance document. If we just move on, please. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Frank Clifton from SSEN, and just a reminder to Frank to introduce yourself as well, please.
Thanks, Randolph. Good afternoon. My name's Frank Clifton. I'm Innovation Manager at Scottish and Southern Electricity Networks. Been involved in quite a number of our NIC projects, and I see quite a number of familiar faces on the attendance list there. So thanks to everyone for joining us. Just a bit of an overview as to what the requirements are for an NIC project. As Randolph said, one of the key things is actually we're addressing some industry challenges. Those are set out and articulated very well in the Network Innovation Strategy document, and as a link there, it's a fairly readable and digestible document, so I would encourage everyone to read it. It's fairly clear. I think you'll see a lot of familiar territory in there. One of the kind of feedback we've got from other things, we've got lots and lots and lots of interesting ideas submitted to us in previous years, but there's not enough thought really been given beyond what is that interesting piece. It's about what turns that into a demonstration in a project, which is an outcome, which is then beneficial to GB customers. So the sorts of things that need to go into that are what are in these next set of requirements. So what we really want to see some evidence that we've actually thought through what we're going to spend the money on, what the project's for. Excuse the helicopter. What the project's for, what the project's actually going to deliver, how it's going to be delivered, what the outcomes will be, and how we're going to achieve those outcomes. And whilst it doesn't need to be tied down in specific detail, some thought of that process needs to be set out. When we're talking about value for money for customers, that's really looking at what the benefits of the project might be and actually identifying that the money we're looking for the trial is proportionate to those benefits. And the project's going to be run efficiently, effectively, with proper prudent governance, procurement, and all those good things. It's got to be generating new knowledge. This cannot be about duplicating something that's been done before, so it's got to be about something that's new, not been trialled before. Obviously, it needs to be innovative. In this context of NIC, what it means by innovative is why is this not being funded for a company's BAU activities? And that usually means because it's not proven, it's got too much risk.
What am I doing?
All right. So it needs to be.
Just a reminder, if everyone can go on mute.
Thank you. It's got to be. We're talking about being innovative. That means not being able to be funded by BAU because there's no mechanism for it. There's no allowance for it. It's too risky. There's no guarantee of return, or never been done before. That's what's meant by being industry. Ideally, it should be fairly broad with a number of partners involved, and hopefully, and ideally, get some leverage some funding from some other source. So in the past, we've leveraged funding from Innovate UK, Industrial Strategy Challenge Funds, ERDF, and quite a number of places to extend the range of the project beyond the traditional network boundaries. But most importantly, I think this is probably one of the more crucial things, is it's got to provide a benefit to network customers. And by network customers, that's customers who pay GEOS charges. It needs to provide a financial benefit to those over between now and 2050. Just move to the next slide, Vivian. So in terms of eligibility, the eligibility criteria are set out in the NIC governance document. As Randolph said earlier, it's quite important to all read that and actually understand what's involved. It's fairly lengthy, but worthwhile doing. I'd also add on Ofgem's website there are some feedback documents on previous year's competitions, and I think there's some good feedback for the expert panel on their views on why projects have been funded and why projects have failed. So again, that's quite a good place to look to get a sense of what's needed. So I think we can probably provide links to those as well, Randolph, if we could. So there's three main sets of criteria. One is this direct impact on networks, and then I'll describe what we need to do. It's a two-stage submission process. There's an initial submission which will take place February, March next year, which is a fairly short submission to Ofgem to outline the project idea, what the benefits will be, who's involved, what we're trying to do, what we're trying to achieve, and that'll be assessed by Ofgem and either approved or not. If it's approved, we then need to go and develop this full submission pro forma, which is quite a chunky piece of work. It's a 100-odd page document with a full financial model, program, plan, budget, outputs, funding, etc. all identified. It's a fairly substantial piece of work, and that will probably have to be submitted July, August in 2021 before it goes into the assessment process. So just talk through what's meant by direct impact on networks. Do you want to skip to the next slide there, Vivian? So what are 3 or 4 main criteria there? So it needs to be a new piece of equipment, something that's not been tried on the GB system or is unproven on the GB system. That can be control, communication, software, hardware. So in the past, that's included alternative types of Scottish Power are a project looking at different types of transformers, an LV engine. E&W have looked at different types of voltage control equipment. We have looked at equipment for maintaining resilience. So it can cover quite a broad range of stuff. It could be a novel arrangement of or application of existing technology in a different way. So we are looking at resilience project, resilience as a service. It's looking at using existing technology in a different way to help maintain network resilience. Or it can be a novel operational practice relating to the operation of the system, or a novel commercial arrangement. Most projects have got an element of novel commercial arrangements in them because we can prove the technology as much as we want, but unless we've got a mechanism for actually deploying that and realizing the benefits from that technology, it's kind of pointless doing this. So really, the business model for realizing the benefits is actually a fairly crucial piece of the jigsaw. It needs to be articulated to justify the funding. So giving some thought as to how you get for that interesting, worthwhile idea, to actually deploying it and realising it to benefit GB customers does need a bit of thinking through and just a bit of creativity as to how we're going to get there. Do you want to skip the next slide there, Vivian? So in the short term, Randolph or one of my colleagues will outline the process we're going to go through to get there, but the first submission of Ofgem, like I said, is this initial submission, ISP it's called, and that's likely to be February time next year. It's a fairly short document, typically about 10 pages. And there's 4 kind of criteria we need to articulate very clearly in that document. It's what does this do to accelerate the development of the low carbon energy sector, deliver environmental benefits or financial benefits for existing and future customers. So how is that going to help us achieve net zero, and how is it going to benefit customers? We need to set that out really, really clearly. And being clear on that is is absolutely critical. Getting that point across is crucial to getting on to the next stage. Then we got to describe how much money we want and why that's value for customers. Again, that's related back to that benefits point, why it's new network and why it can be applied across the whole of GB. And then probably more fairly importantly, why it's innovative. Why is this not being done as BAU by either you as an innovator or us as a network? And why does it need the support of customers to justify this demonstration? Thinking through those things is pretty clear. So when you submit the idea, just please think through what these points actually mean, how your technology or your approach is actually going to get us there. Interesting is not enough. We need to get to have almost like a so what at the end of the project to realise the benefits we want for that. Okay. And then finally, Vivian, if we get through that ISP, look, Ofgem generally take 2 or 3 weeks to assess those. We then so when I got the next slide, Vivian, please. And then finally, for the full submission, like I said, it's about 100 pages with a fully costed plan, budget, financial model, etc. It's a fairly onerous piece of work. It's about 100 odd pages, like I said. We need to set out who will be involved in the project and what other funding's coming to bear. Relevance and timing is why are we doing this project now? When will it produce the outputs? So it's no good producing an output to a project which is the project producing an outcome to a problem which is here today, and we need to be making sure the problems are being solved in time for our networks to implement the solutions. And then we actually need to set out what we're going to do with the money by having a robust methodology and a plan to show we can actually make a successful job of delivering that project. It's a fairly onerous piece of work, but there are a lot of examples online of what's needed to be done. I think there's a fair degree of experience amongst the network community and many of you folks on the call where we can work together. So as Randolph said, when we get past that selection stage, we want to put more input to help guide and shape the ISP submissions with those projects. And I think that's going to help us get a much richer and more successful portfolio of projects. So I think I'm handing across to Geraldine now. Is that correct?
Yeah, Frank. I'm Geraldine Patterson. I'm the Innovation Manager at Electricity Northwest. And like Frank, I'd like to echo my thanks for you all to join us today. It's good to see so many people on the call. I might recap a little bit of what Frank's just said as well regarding the timeline and stuff, but it is quite important that you understand the level of work involved in putting one of these together. So the top of the slide there shows the timeline for the current call that we've got out. So we're currently in the sort of first phase of it where we're asking for your ideas in. We're having this webinar today to basically give you the chance to ask us some questions to help you formulate the submissions you're going to make to us by the end of the month. We will then go away, review all those and come up with a short list of those that we think are viable projects to go in to the process next year. And then we will ask those shortlisted participants to come and pitch to us. Well, it would have been directly come and pitch to us. So I suppose this year it would be a virtual pitch. To us to explain in more detail, give us a chance to find out a little bit more about it than you can from a piece of paper. And then by the middle of December, well, the 18th on there, we will be announcing the decision of which projects we're taking forward. And by that point as well, we should also know which DNOs are interested in taking which project forward, which may be more than one DNO for projects as we've had in previous years. So the bottom line is actually the timeline then for the actual NIC submission next year. So as Frank said, the first big milestone is putting the initial screening proposal into Ofgem, which is normally early April. And it is, as he said, a 10-page document, but it contains quite a lot of important information to get across and get through that hurdle of this is actually something worth us putting a bigger bid together for. And normally by May, then Ofgem will let us know whether or not we've passed that stage. And then it's on to do the full submission, which, as Frank says, is actually a very large 100-page document. The first half of the document is very prescribed sections with the various questions and the guidance criteria to answer. And then we do have the second sort of half of the document to put appendices in to sort of give further information and further bolster the sort of case that we're putting forward. Has to have a full business case with it, project plan has to be well thought out. And then once that gets submitted, normally about the end of July, we then enter into what we call the Q&A process. And that can run from then right through till about this time. The one for this year is more or less just concluded. And in that process, we can receive questions from is either Ofgem, they employ an expert panel and they have some consultants that review these bids, and they can ask us questions every Tuesday and Thursday, and you normally have a 2-day turnaround time to respond back to the answers. That being said, in our case this year, we got quite a few questions on one particular day, and we were allowed some extra time other than the 2 days. So, you know, if you do get a lot of questions, there may be some chance to delay, sort of have a bit longer to respond. But also during that Q&A process in September, we normally have 2 bilaterals with the expert panel. The first one is normally early September, and the second one sort of late September. And the first one is normally very high level, and you introduce the project, they get to ask you some questions to understand a bit more. And the second one is a bit more focused of some particular questions or particular areas that like some more information on. And once you've gone through that process, you then get the chance to resubmit your bid to make any minor corrections or additions as a result of that process. And then it's a waiting game till the end of November to when the decision's announced. And normally when the decision's announced, then you go into sort of getting all the various paperwork in place, and projects normally start in earnest in the January of the following year. So this call we're putting at the moment is probably looking for projects to actually start in January 2022. So if you could just move to the next slide, please, Vivian. So we wanted to give you some reflections on previous years, and a lot of the past successful projects are all available online. So Ofgem do publish all the redacted bid submission documents, so they're all available. Ofgem also published their decision document. The link to the 2019 one is there for you to look at when you receive the slides. You will notice in the 2019 one, 2 successful projects, the DC Share 1 and the Resilience as a Service, both came through this process. And the DC Share 1, although it is aligned to Western Power, we as Electricity North West are actually another partner on that project, because both of us were interested in the project when it came through the call. But WPD are in as the lead and we're in as a supporting partner. So the process does work, and we have taken projects right through to successful that we're starting to deliver them now. But they do need to, as Frank has said, to be something that's very deliverable and that the network actually needs. So if you like to go to the next slide, please, Vivian. So I think some reflections that we've had back from Ofgem in previous years make sort of echo some of the things you've already heard today. So it's the robustness of the methodology and the implementation of the project, and also what you think it's going to do afterwards. These projects are normally such a way that by the end of it, we're effectively more or less going straight into business as usual and rolling them out. Previous projects that is sort of, we are already starting to roll out. You don't want it to be too broad. It needs to be deliverable within the time frame. It's not about boiling the ocean. It's about solving a particular problem. And the benefits is the big one, is that GB customers, all GB customers pay for this through their GWAS charges. So we need to provide evidence that the benefits will flow back to the GB customers through their GWAS charges. So, and you normally have to sort of, as Frank says, that the benefits need to justify the spend on the project, and you need to show the benefits sort of out to 2050, both financially and because of the net zero, the carbon benefits as well. We've had some in the past where they said it wasn't innovative enough, it wasn't valued for money, but that's about how you sort of pitch the project, also about not doing replication. They say there's plenty of information both on the Ofgem website and on the ENA Smarter Networks portal of the types of innovation that have gone on before. And then it's the getting back to the benefits again. It is the electricity